I want to talk a little bit today about why we write. What calls on us to write? Why do we choose writing over painting or singing or playing Fortnite? Why write? Now, this is maybe not the best way to start a creative writing class. I mean, maybe we just should talk about, how do you put words on paper, or what kinds of tools do you use to create beautiful pieces of literature or ugly pieces of literature? Why, what is it that we do when we set out to write? But I like starting at why. Why write? Why are you in a creative writing class? Why do you want to write? I think those are important questions for you to consider as you set out to do weekly writing for the next few weeks in this class. Why are you here? I mean, if it's just for college credit, if you just want to take some courses and get credits for the humanities and move on, that's one thing. But most people don't take creative writing for that. Most people take creative writing because for somehow they've gotten attached to the idea of language and creation on the page, the idea of saying something. But I think our reasons for wanting to say something are much more particular than just, I want to write because I want to write. Let's explore a few reasons. Maybe you write to find love, or to get love, or to pay for love. I don't know. Maybe you write because of love. The example here on the left from a little kid writing about Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's. I hope you have a great day. And I like you too. And by like you, do you mean love? If you do, me too. But we can't be boyfriend or girlfriend because my mom won't let me. But we can like and be friend and play together. P.S. It's not my best writing. We use writing from a very early age to find love, to get love, to be in love, to fall out of love. Maybe you write for money. It's not an invalid reason for writing because you want to make money off your writing. Lots and lots of people do it. Maybe you write for a message. We have at the bottom a picture of a pastor or a minister creating a sermon. Maybe you write because you have a message to give. Maybe you write because you want to tell stories that you love. The image on the top left is of Captain Kirk and Spock caught in a scene that maybe never happened in the actual TV show. But there are lots of people who write fan fiction, who create stories about the things that they love, to tell stories about their imaginings in that universe. There is fan fiction about Star Trek. There's fan fiction about Game of Thrones. There's fan fiction about Harry Potter. Maybe you write because not just because of fan fiction, but because you want to tell stories that matter to you. Maybe you write because you want to say something in the world, because you want to argue something, because you want to assert a truth like Black Lives Matter. The phrase Black Lives Matter is really a brilliant piece of writing, and it expresses something in a way that makes it inarguable. Or maybe you just write because you are sitting in your room and you want to figure out how to express something. I thought it might be useful to talk about where my writing comes from as a teacher. I'm a poet. I also do academic writing, and occasionally I do stories or Facebook writing. I don't actually pursue much public writing, although I love doing readings of my poetry. But I do write. I do write quite a bit. Sometimes not as much as I used to. Now I'm surrounded by lawnmowers outside and children inside and dogs barking and lots of papers to grade, and I don't get to write as much as I used to. But I love writing. And if I think about why I write, there's a few reasons. One of the reasons is because I want to explore the human condition. I want to figure out why I experience the things that I experience and why that's meaningful and why it might be meaningful to other people. We have a quote here on the left from Hannah Arendt, who's a philosopher, who said, "The human condition is such that pain and effort are not just symptoms which can be removed without changing life itself. They are the modes in which life itself, together with the necessity to which it is bound, makes itself felt. For mortals, the easy life of the gods would be a lifeless life." And for me, this quote says something about why I write, because I want to explore the pains and the efforts of humanity and what that means to experience life. And I want to do that through language. That gets to the next picture here, a picture from Winnie the Pooh, which for me is one of the most amazing books ever written. And I remember reading it as a child, and I remember reading it to my children, and I've taught it, and I've explored it, because the ways that he uses language are shocking and exciting. And for me, that's one reason why I write. Quite often, when I set out to write something, it is because I've thought of a line that is meaningful, and I want to explore where that line goes. This is what Pooh says: "Poetry and hums aren't things which you get, they're things which get you. All you can do is to go where they find you." I kind of like that. You don't understand poems, you don't understand lines, you experience them, which kind of goes with the experience of life that Hannah Arendt was talking about. The last image here is an image of a Supreme Court, a state Supreme Court. I think it's like Ohio, where you have somebody who's presenting in front of the court, presenting their ideas, their arguments. And for me, that's one of the reasons why I write, is because I want to stand up and make people listen to me and judge me. But of course, I want the good judgment. I want them to tell me I did a good job, or I want them to tell me that I am a good writer. But for me, part of it is that being judged that I write for. I want that experience, and that experience goes all the way back to my dad, who was a frequent judger of mine, to my colleagues here at the school. One of my best colleagues is Angela Hethkanavala, the chair of the English department, and I love it when she comments on my writing. To outside readers, to doing a poetry reading and having people come up to you and say, "That was really meaningful. I love that." I write for that moment of judgment. Let's take a look now at a poem that I've written. And I'm going to share some writing with you this semester, because I want to let you see that I am a writer, that I do participate in creative writing. And I think it's useful to have a writer who's been doing it for a long time to stand in front of you as you're beginning to learn how to write, to talk about what choices they made. So here's one of my poems, The Talk. Death toll are adult words, I guess. We tend to forget, don't we? Just move on and pretend that everything will be. "All right, so let's talk about death," said the dad to the children, and the kids groaned like they'd heard it all before. Or not. The birds die. The bees die. Disease happens. And every child must learn, must study, must contemplate, must sit with the moment, the reliability of the heart, the validity of lungs. We have watched our dogs die. Our papa. The children have stories. But specters from the news make uncertain the fate of mom and dad, make existence uncertain. We sit at dinner and talk death, because questions will be asked. They don't yet know my years of AIDS, nuclear war, bird flu, Katrina, SARS. My wisdom of the end is fairly useless for children who just want to know the news lies and life goes on. It doesn't, of course. Does it ever go on? Death happens, especially to those who forget to procreate until they are 40. And what good am I to tell lies about living to children now that I can see the end? Yes, I've survived it all, but the end still comes. It turns, it creaks, the cogs eat up the father before I can say everything will be all right. I wrote this poem, you can see by the date, March 8th, 2020, right before we all went into quarantine. And I wrote it because I thought of the line, death toll are adult words. And I wanted to see where that went. I wanted to see what it meant for my children who were confronting a world where there was about to be a bunch of death. And I think many of us knew in March 8th, 2020, there was a bunch of death coming. I wanted to explore what my children were going to experience in looking forward into a world with so much death. And I'm an older dad. I didn't have my kids until I was 40. Well, not all of them. And so I wanted to think about what it means for my kids to grow up knowing for certain that I'm going to die before they've lived their full adult life. And so I created a poem because I felt a call to explain my experience, to play with my language, and to see if I could say this in a way that would make other people turn their heads. So let's turn to you. What stories do you have to tell? What do you want others to think of you? How does language work in your head? What do others need to know? What do you want to say? How are your words beautiful? Why write? I want to present an idea here, and that is that sometimes when you want to write, it's good to know the context in which you're writing. This is an idea from freshman composition, from college academic writing. Knowing the context in which you're writing is sometimes helpful for the writing situation. Knowing what your purpose is as a writer, knowing how the audience is going to be engaged in your words and your ideas, thinking about the genre in which you're writing. Are you going to write poetry, fiction, drama? Are you going to write hip hop, rap? Are you going to write a rant? Are you going to write a Facebook meme? Knowing the genre and the textual design, the questions of textual design that come with that, and then knowing who you are and how you're bringing yourself in, what you want to say, why you matter. That's your context of writing, and understanding those things before you write is not a bad thing to do. And of course, the context changes. If you're going to write a love note, you're going to write a letter to the credit card company, you're going to write a poem to try to express something. That context changes the ways you approach the writing. Sometimes it's useful to think about that. Other times, you just got to write. Your head is exploding with ideas. Your head is exploding with emotion. Your head is exploding with message. And sometimes, you just got to write. I want to kind of go here and try to see if we can explore a reason to write, and also to kind of force you into a moment of writing. So what I'd like you to do is get a piece of paper out, and we're going to do an exercise here. We'll pause for a second, let you get a piece of paper. Of course, you can hit pause on the playback here. I want you to imagine that you have written a poem. You may not have ever written a poem before. You may not ever want to write a poem, but let's imagine that you've written one that you care about. I want you to think of one person who will read that poem. It could be your mama, and she wants to put it on the refrigerator. It could be your dad, who doesn't give a shit about poems. It could be your 4th grade English teacher or your 12th grade English teacher. It could be your lover. It could be your enemy. It could be somebody who finds it in the street in a trash can. It could be a Pulitzer Prize judge who's looking for the next award winner. I want you to think of one person who will read your poem. And now, let's try writing. Okay, you have no idea where this is going unless you've read my screen, but here we go. We're going to write a 4-line exploration of audience and writers. So imagine the poem that you've written now. And now, imagine the person who's reading it. I want you to describe that person's eyes as they read. Just write one line. Describe that person's eyes as they read. If it's somebody you know well, you probably know their eyes fairly well. If it's somebody you don't know well, you can still kind of imagine what their eyes are doing, what they look like, the timbre of their color of their eyes, the ways that their eyes slant or squeeze as they're reading. Describe this person's eyes as they read. One line. The next line. Describe the person's hands as they hold the page. Think about how you can describe this person through their hands. Are they spotted with age marks? Are they as fresh as a baby's butt? Do they have oil marks and grease stains? Describe this one person's hands as they hold the page of your palm. One line. Next line. Show us what the poem physically does to that person. Now here you might have to use your imagination, or maybe you have to get a little bit outlandish, or maybe you could just be straightforward. What does the poem physically do to the person? I don't want to give you any ideas, because this is your exploration. But just try to push your thinking here. How could a page affect a person? One line. And then the next line, last line. Tell us what action this person takes immediately after reading the poem. What do they do once they've finished reading? And here we could go again with like the straightforward truth of what they might do, or you might go metaphorically what they might do. What does this person do after they read the poem? One line. Now, what an exercise like this does for you is it does two things. It's asking you to think about creating something here on the spot, something that you didn't know you were going to create, which is kind of a cool exercise to do, because I imagine those 4 lines you have right now could be revised a little bit, developed a little bit, and you might actually have a nice little poem that you could create, that you could share. Or maybe the start of a paper or a start of a memoir that you want to write. You got 4 lines there. That's one thing that you've done. You've explored, you've started doing some creative writing just in that moment. But another thing that this kind of exercise does is it allows you to kind of be reflective, to be meta when it comes to your writing. Who's looking at you? Why are you concerned with other people? Who reads you? It allows you to think a little bit more about the effects that your writing has in the world, which is always a good thing to think about as a writer. Lin-Manuel Miranda, creator of Hamilton, is also a writer. He's got this amazing song called "Wrote My Way Out." It's on the Hamilton mixtape. I wrote my way out when the world turned its back on me. I was up against the wall. I had no foundation, no friends, and no family to catch my fall. Running on empty, there was nothing left in me but doubt. I picked up my pen and I wrote my way out. For Miranda, writing is a type of salvation. Salvation from what's going on in your head, salvation from the world around you, salvation from living in the hood, salvation from the stresses of your own brain. Many, many reasons we have for writing. none more legitimate than any other. But here's one artist who explores why they're writing their way out. I want you to think about what is calling you to write. Is it just me, your professor, who's telling you you've got to do some writing in this class? Or is it something more, somebody more, somewhere more, some experience more? What is calling you to write, and how will you answer? How will you answer that call? I gotta give you a little bit of personal information here. My granddaddy was a Southern Baptist preacher, and I grew up as a fundamentalist Southern Baptist, going to church every Sunday, every Wednesday, every vacation Bible school, every revival. We went to church all the time. In the Southern Baptist Church, in the church that I grew up in my granddaddy's church, the church, the minister would always have an invitation at the end of a sermon, at the end of some kind of service. They would have an invitation inviting people to come up to the front of the church and to accept Jesus as their Savior, to confess their sins, to rededicate their lives, to join the church. They would invite people up, standing up at the front of the sanctuary, saying, "Brothers and sisters, today is the day. Today is the day that you are being called. Will you listen to that voice, that still small voice in your head? Will you listen? Will you listen and obey? Who is calling you? How will you answer?" Now, I don't quite have that same belief system anymore, except for maybe writing. I do believe we have a call for writing, and I believe we have an answer. Who is calling you, and how will you answer? We'll talk to you next week.